Hello, fifth graders. Jason Brown here with Boone County 4-H coming to you with a real brief election process lesson. Typically, if we were in the classroom, I would come in and we'd do a lesson on the government sometime this fall. But we're obviously not able to do that in person, and we have a unique situation with the current election to be able to educate you on some things related to the election process. And just take that opportunity to do so. Hopefully, it'll fill in some cracks of things that maybe you don't understand, things that you've never heard before, but I hope it'll prompt you to look and educate yourself a bit more on this process. So just taking a moment to share with you some things related to the election process. Now, as you know, and you probably had an assignment where you had to keep up with what was happening. At this point, our two main candidates, Joseph Biden on the left there, current President Donald Trump on the right there. Joseph Biden has 253 electoral votes, and he's running ahead with the 72 million of the popular votes. Donald Trump has 214 of the electoral votes and 68 million of the popular vote. Some states are having some contested issues right now. There's been questions about balloting, especially in the area of the mail-in ballots, which is a new system for America in the sense of this mass level of mail-in ballots. And so there's been some contention, some questioning about how it's being carried out, and some questions of fraud even. Some of it's quite embellished, and some of it seems a little bit legit, and so there needs to be some follow-up and some investigation. I think that's fair. But at this point, we've got several states that are undecided. And therefore, as you see from the picture there, neither candidate has the 270 votes needed to win. Both are just a bit shy of that. And so we're kind of waiting to see how this turns out and what's going to shake out from this. And it feels very tense. It is a contentious election, and I would say by my guesstimation, it's going to continue to be tense all the way up till the very end. And that seems like something that's frightening to us. It's something new for us, but I want to encourage you by saying this process and what we're seeing is nothing new. Matter of fact, if we look at our history, we've got a big history of deeply divided elections. One of them, the election of 1824, you see on the left of the picture there, Andrew Jackson, on the right's John Quincy Adams. Well, it's a very contentious election and ended in a way that very much seems unfair. Jackson wins the popular vote and leads in the Electoral College. But with four candidates, even though these two are the main ones, there were four total candidates. With four total candidates, no candidate clearly won the Electoral College. So the vote then goes to the House, and the House eventually, through some political maneuvering and voting many times, they vote Adams as the president of the United States. Again, very contentious election, very hard fought. And in the end, we certainly can question the outcome of that through the voting process that the House carried out. You go to the election of 1876, and this election is, by historians, most historians would say this is the most contentious and probably what you could just go ahead and call fraudulent election in American history. On the right of the picture is a Democrat candidate, Samuel Tilden, and on the left is Rutherford B. Hayes, was the Republican. And so Tilden has the popular vote and was one vote away from securing the Electoral College. And there were many disputes related to voter fraud and things related to the voting process and whether or not it was fairly carried out. So Congress assembles a committee of Supreme Court justices, senators, and congressmen to ultimately decide. And in the end, they choose Hayes, the Republican, but not until there was some really shady backdoor deals that would actually lead to the end of Reconstruction. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about Reconstruction. Investigate that yourself, and you'll see why that had a big impact that it had on this election. But essentially, the Democrats say in this backdoor sort of shady deal, if we give you the presidency, what we want is for you to end the final steps of Reconstruction in the South. And it was all agreed. Hayes becomes the president, even though clearly Tilden was the winner. Again, study that on your own, but it's one of the shadiest and probably most fraudulent election in American history in some ways. The most recent election where there's a lot of contention was in election of 2000. On the left there, you have the Democrat candidate, former Vice President Al Gore, and then you have on the right the Republican candidate, George W. Bush. Now, Al Gore wins the popular vote pretty solidly, but the Electoral College votes were really close, and Florida was going to come down to being the deciding factor. But there were some issues in Florida with their punch ballots going through the machine. Some of the punches weren't lined up or didn't go through right, and there was some inability to tell what the punch had actually chosen. Did it choose Al Gore or did it choose George W. Bush? And so there was a lot of contention and recounting of ballots. Eventually, Al Gore files a lawsuit when George W. Bush is declared the winner, and the Supreme Court would ultimately decide in Bush's favor. Now, I also want to point out that this election is what has led to, in the modern era, a call for ending the Electoral College and going solely by the popular vote. Now, I've said all that. We've had contentious elections before, but maybe some of you are unsure about how the voting process works altogether. I'm going to briefly tell you how that works. Again, you'll want to take some time and investigate on your own. But number one, registered U.S. citizens vote on election day at their designated location. Okay, and you see a picture of that as an example. When I say designated location, that means if you're from Kentucky, you vote in Kentucky. If you're from a specific county and city, that's the county and city that you would vote in. There has been mail-in ballots, and that's been a big thing this election because of COVID, and so I'll add that to the process. The popular vote from each state then advises people in each state called electors, okay? So in each state, there's electors, or these people assigned to vote on behalf of the people, okay? And as you see in number 3 there, electors then typically use the people's popular vote and in turn should cast a vote for that candidate. So as an example, Kentucky has 8 electors, okay? That's based on Kentucky's population, and so those 8 electors are assigned to vote on behalf of the people, and they are informed based on the popular vote who to vote for. So Kentucky, this election pretty solidly went for Donald Trump, and that means because the popular vote went for Donald Trump, those 8 electors should cast their vote in favor of Donald Trump on behalf of the people, okay? Now, number 4, in our time, the candidate that receives 270 electoral votes will win the election. Okay, so our number in our time is 270. The bottom there, it says, note the problem is in history. There have been times when the electors don't choose based on the popular vote in their state. Many disagree with this. Okay, so yeah, the electors don't have to choose the popular vote from their state. And there's been times in the past where they have not done that. Many people disagree with that. Matter of fact, before this election, Colorado passed a law that said that the electors have to vote according to the popular vote. So Colorado in this election pretty clearly went for Joe Biden. That means by Colorado law, those electors in Colorado have to vote for Joe Biden. Again, just a quick overview. Dive into it on your own a little bit deeper. There's great videos and information out there on that. You might ask the question, why are these electors so important? Why not just do a popular vote, have that be the election and decide it? And you know what? I can see that point of view, and it's a great question. But what the Electoral College does is try to decide the will of the people overall throughout the whole United States, okay? Because what we have, the wrench in the popular vote only, is if we went by popular vote for the election alone, that could potentially mean that the election is decided by only a few counties in only a few states in the United States. So counties primarily in California, New York, and a few other places with really large, dense populations, they could decide the whole election for all 50 states. And that hardly seems fair for 2 or 3 states to decide the election for the whole nation. Now, it's a bit more complicated than this, but I think you get the general idea. And again, it's on you to do a little bit of self-education to study a little bit deeper. So what happens if the current voting issues are not resolved? If the popular vote in the Electoral College doesn't clearly decide a winner, or if there's cries of fraud or things like that, or cries of error in voting, we're seeing that right now. What happens? Well, this is what we all wish would happen, right? Right here. Yeah, they could just fight it out in a ring. Wouldn't that be awesome? Well, no, it'd be terrible. It'd be a bit embarrassing for the American people and the nation. That's obviously a joke, and sometimes a joke picture like that can break the tension. What'll really happen if the current voting issues are not resolved. And there are 5 steps to this. And it's going to seem like I'm throwing a lot at you, and I am. But what I want you to pull away from this is not the idea of remembering every step, but the idea of understanding that if this isn't decided clearly through the election process, don't think this is the end of our nation or something bad's going to happen, because there are steps in process to clearly work this out. And those steps run deep. So number 1, the state's electoral votes are cast on December the 14th, and the candidate who gets at least 270 of the 538 votes for the Electoral College wins. Now note, what we see on TV on election night is assumption that the electors will follow the popular vote, okay? Because the electors don't vote till December the 14th, so how on November the 3rd could they say Kentucky is going to go to Donald Trump? He'll get those 8 electors. Well, the news outlets are assuming that in most cases the electors will vote according to the popular vote. And so that's how they kind of guesstimate on that. Even with this uncertainty of popular vote results in a few states, there will still be structure in place for the Electoral College to look at the election results and cast their vote for their state based on who they think should be president. So again, December 14th is coming. The electors are going to vote, and so it progresses forward, even if the popular vote is still a little bit up in the air. Number 2, if there is no clear winner in the Electoral College, the 12th Amendment dictates that the House of Representatives would vote to elect the president, and the Senate would vote to pick the vice president. And so with the House being Democrat-led and the Senate being Republican-led, we're likely looking at then a Biden and Pence selection, okay? Congress would be responsible for the so-called contingent election. Now, a contingency plan means you have a backup plan. And so there's a backup plan if the electors can't decisively pick a president. So in this process, the House would have to choose between the top 3 candidates who have the most electoral votes, or in this case, President Trump and Joe Biden. For the VP slot, the Senate would need to pick between the 2 vice president candidates. And of course, you're looking at Mike Pence and Kamala Harris. So number 3, again, I'm throwing a lot at you, but I want you to understand this process runs deep. And so we've got several fail-safes in place in case things aren't going to go smoothly. If the House fails to elect a president by the time of January the 20th, the inauguration day rolls around, then the vice president-elect chosen by the Senate serves as acting president until the deadlock is resolved in the House. So again, with the Senate being led by the Republicans at this point, Mike Pence would become a temporary president until everything was sorted out. Number 4, if all else fails, if the Senate fails to choose a VP, then the 20th Amendment takes over, making the vice president-elect acting president until a president has qualified. And then if all else really fails, in the unlikely event that neither president-elect nor the vice president-elect are chosen by Congress by January the 20th, then the Presidential Succession Act applies, and this would mean that Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi would become president until both chambers of Congress decide on someone. So again, you see clearly that there's a depth of process here to finally resolve and pick someone. And so hopefully that makes you feel a little bit better about some of the chaos you've been seeing in the news. Now, there's a catch to all this. At some point, the Supreme Court could have the say in the election results since it's become popular for disputing candidates to file a lawsuit, and then it's a judicial matter that will be decided by the Supreme Court. President Trump has already done this, and so it's likely the Supreme Court could be the ones to decide who the next president will be, just like that they were the deciding factor in the 2000 election. This is a lot to throw at you, and it's really confusing. I get it. It is a lot. But again, I want you to be educated on this. I want to take the opportunity to give you some information that maybe you're not going to see and sort of break it down for you. And hey, now that you know this, if you can remember it or do some self-educating and learn a little bit more about it, you actually know something that most, even the smartest voter, don't know. They don't know these things. And so you now know something that even an educated voter doesn't really know or understand fully, because I've broken it down for you. And again, I hope it gives you some hope that this is not the end. It's just it happens. We've had it happen in history several times, and we can rest assured that things will turn out okay. And we know that there's a process in place. Again, my name is Jason Brown, Boone County 4-H. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope that you all are doing well. I'm hoping that if this COVID thing will finally come to an end at some point, that we'll actually get to see each other in person, face to face at some point. Hopefully after the first of the year, we'll see. If not, maybe you'll receive a couple more of these educational videos, and hopefully they'll be helpful for you. And just stay safe, everybody. My hope is we'll see each other soon.